Welcome to this video on establishing identity. In this video, we are going to talk about identity management in terms of registration, proofing, and establishing of identity. Now again, if you recall from the previous video, identity is a subject claiming to be who or what they are. So again, we often think of identity being as people or as user. But computer, applications, servers, and so on can also have identities. That's why we have host name, IP addresses, and MAC addresses. Those are form of identity. And in order to create an identity, we have to go through a registration process. We have to create an applicant's identity and add that identity into some kind of registration system. Now, oftentimes that's called an identification and authentication management system. It can be called a lot of different things, but in essence, we need a system to control how those identities are managed. Then there's also a Credential Service Provider or CSP. This will then perform the identity proofing process for us. Now, this is not to be confused with the Cloud Service Provider. CSP. This is different acronyms and different meaning. The identity proofing process will take the applicant's information and then the evidence of their identity, and it will provide that to the CSP. Now, the CSP could be anyone, anything or anyone that is creating the identity. So the idea is that you need a way to confirm the applicant is who they say they are. And this CSP will process all of the evidence and affirm that the claimed identity is true based on a certain level of assurance. So identification can be accomplished using identification cards like driver license, passport, birth certificate, and so on. And identification should be done in person, or it can be validated by organization remotely as well, and that is based on the level of assurance that you want for the identity. Those assurance level are follows. You have identity assurance level 1. This is self-asserted attributes, meaning I am just making the claim, right? This is I'm just claiming that I am certain identity, but it's not going to be validated or verified. So this could be done remotely, does not need to be in person obviously. And an example would be an account on youtube.com, right? We don't validate or verify the information in that regard. We don't require you to prove who you are or who you say you are. We trust you. When you purchase this video or purchase the subscription, we used a payment gateway. You had to assert to the payment gateway you are and who you said you are. So we have some level of assurance that you are who you say you are, right? So we did some level of verification, but not a whole of a lot. Then we have level 2, which is evidence is required to support the real world existence of a claim identity. This can be done remotely, but is preferred to be in person. An example would be a guest user account. Someone comes into your organization, then want internet access, right? So their privileges are going to be very limited. So we could have like a simple online form that they have to fill out and complete and provide a little bit of information, including their company name, contact information, and employee ID number, and so on. And then we have level 3, which is physical presence is required to prove a claimed identity. So an example is system administrator account. Because of the privilege involved here, we would require without a doubt that this person is who they say they are. So we have to verify them in person, and they have to provide all of the required credential to prove they are who they say they are. And we may even include background check as a part of this process as well. Now, when choosing which assurance level that you want to use in your organization is really as simple as understanding how much assurance you need for each individual user or each individual subject, right? If you are just going to allow people access to your website, then level 1 probably fine. If you are going to have user on your system, you want level 2. If you are going to have any kind of privilege level user that have access to configuration and things like that, then they can do administrative tasking. Then you want that to be level 3, and that is all dependent on how much time, money and effort you want to invest in this, and there need to be a good balance according to the organization policy. Now the process itself start with what called resolution. So once we start the identify proofing, we are going to perform resolution, where we are going to collect all of the applicant's attributes and their supporting evidence and provide that to the CSP. The CSP is going to validate this. Then they are going to confirm the accuracy of the identity evidence. Then the evidence is going to be verified, the identity is confirmed and established at that point. So let's step through the process in real quick. First of all, you have your application, right? Your applicant is going to be requesting an identity of some kind. Then we start the resolution process. The resolution is where we collect all the information, all the evidence, and we try to find if this individual is unique, right? And we want to distinguish that from all of our other identities within the system. Then we move on the validation, where we are going to validate that this person is indeed unique, and we are going to validate the authenticity, the validity and accuracy of the information that they have provided, so that we can determine if they are real life subject or not. Then we moved into verification, where we now create the linkage between the claimed identity and the real life existence of a particular subject. And once all of that has been confirmed, they now become subscriber or user or whatever we have. Now resolution makes sure that information provided is authentic and accurate as possible. Now what's important is, when we are collecting some kind of information, some of it can be personally identifiable information. It could be sensitive. So we want to have security policies in place to protect the data and other private information we have collected as part of the proofing process. And as part of the validation process, we want to make sure that evidence is reviewed thoroughly and is validated with an authoritative source. That could be government issue, driver license or passport or birth certificate. We want to go to the source and validate that those are true and correct form of identity, right? And again, throughout this process, we might be interacting with third parties or other government agencies or other places, right? Especially if we are doing background checks and so on. So we want to make sure that the applicant's personal identifiable information is protected in accordance with those security policies as well. Then we move to that verification, where we are looking at the actual photograph versus the real person that's standing in front of us. So this would be mainly for human objects, if you will, users that are trying to register to the system. We would have photo ID on their passport or driving license, and we would match this photo to their physical person as they are standing in front of us to validate the identity. The enrollment information is then sent to the applicant. Then the applicant would confirm enrollment to complete the proofing process, and at this point they would be given their credentials so that they can now access the system. And some consideration for the enrollment process, it's very important that each step can be clearly outlined, and it is as easy as possible for the applicant to complete. If it is different, if it is confusing, it's likely they won't get through the process. So we want to make this step clear, and we want to clearly define what data is collected and why it is needed. And we also want to clearly define how the data is protected and who will access it as part of the process. So the bottom line for this video, to know that all subject must be registered for access, understand the identity proofing process, know the information assurance level, and understand the need for person identifiable information data protection.